The article that I read pertains to the aspect of how space companies are facing a challenging investment environment. So, from the article, a concept or theme that was really interesting was how, if you think about it, a lot of space startups, for example, need the necessary funding to continue operations in space. So, just taking away from like the general, broad, overarching theme, it's really a concerning thing to think about, and it's important that the space startups actually receive the necessary funding they need to actually continue their operations, attempt to scale, and conduct the space activity that they're essentially attempting to accomplish. There was a lot of broad macroeconomic financial trends, and then they went even more specific to talk about this concern with how startups are concerned about the aspect of not receiving the appropriate amount of capital investment going forward. And I think that's really interesting because when we're thinking about space, and especially with space startups, there's obviously a financial side and perspective that goes into things. The financial investment, the startup capital investment side, bolsters a lot of the activities for these startups to continue and attempt to scale and conduct the operations that they're trying to accomplish. So it was interesting to read about it from that perspective, which is ever so important. As far as a potential security implication, well, if we think about how utilizing machine learning for learning more about space, that requires data, as we talked about before. And then if you also think about how, in order to really optimize, become more efficient, and get better at things, because you need feedback for that, and because if there is basically a lack of investments in startups for space, what this translates to on a very like macro scale is overall there would be obviously less activity in space, right? Because if less startups are receiving the necessary capital or funding, then there's going to be less startups conducting their operations in space, most likely. So what that means is less data on a like macro general scale. So machine learning models are not as optimized, and then less overall activity from space startups means there's less activity going on in space, so you're not really receiving as much feedback and information to get better and become better in space and become more optimized as if there were more. And that's on like a general perspective or scale. But that's a potential security implication because obviously, with the concern of this class, we're focused on getting smarter in space, learning more about it, learning how to curtail or stop adversaries from conducting various activities that are bad in space from the cybersecurity perspective. But this all translates back to the potential security implications. If you're not becoming better in space, you're not getting smarter, and you're not learning from mistakes and receiving more feedback. So I thought about it from that angle.